It's going up on a Friday. This is Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Senior. Hope all of you out there getting set to have a fantastic weekend. A great show on tap for all of you today as the Birds making a couple of roster moves, including signing tight end Albert Okwuegbunam. And the Eagles have officially, going into the NFL Combine next week, finalize their coaching staff under Nick Sirianni for 2024. Speaking of the NFL Scouting Combine, the other day on Wednesday, I challenged everybody. You get us to 72,000 subscribers, the bosses are sending me to Indy to cover the Scouting Combine. Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni going to talk on Tuesday. We'll bring you that interview here on the channel. We'll do some mock drafts. We're going to catch up with the guys from Pro Football Focus, do some interviews with some other people who cover the National Football League, and of course, talk to some draft prospects who meet with Philadelphia to get their thoughts on going to the Eagles. So make sure you subscribe. This handsome fella here to my right and this guy right here will be in Indy. Great coverage here on tap for Philadelphia Eagles Now. So the Birds this week making 3 roster moves, adding 3 players to their roster. Earlier this week, we talked about how Philadelphia signed running back Ty Davis-Price, more on him in a moment, as well as right tackle Darrian Kinnard. Ty Davis-Price coming to Philadelphia from the 49ers, Darrian Kinnard going to Philadelphia from the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And the Eagles here bulking up their tight end depth with another roster move, signing tight end Albert Okwuegbunam. And the Eagles traded for him going into the season last year on a roster cut-down day. And the Eagles bring him back on a 1-year contract. He was kind of out of the plans for new Broncos head coach Sean Payton, went off in the final preseason finale game for Denver, and the Broncos were going to cut him. Instead, they get some trade compensation back, and Philadelphia saw something in the player. That's why they were wheeling and dealing and brought in Albert Okwuegbunam. It was a weird year for him last year. The Eagles traded for him to keep him from hitting waivers. That tells me and told me that they like the upside of the player. He was buried on the depth chart for the entire 2023 season. Brian Johnson barely used him at all. He only had 1 target all season long. And then he was placed on IR in December. So instead of letting Albert O hit waivers, they traded for him. And instead of letting Albert O go to free agency this year, with free agency set to start the second week of March, the Eagles are bringing him back on that 1-year contract. Philadelphia, in that trade before the season last year, traded a 2025 6th-round pick and 7th-round pick. So draft compensation for a player who got 1 target. Up to this point, it hasn't worked out. And he was a 2024th-round pick out of Mizzou. Relayed this story a couple of times, but my first job out of college in Springfield, Illinois, after I graduated from Temple University, I got my broadcasting start for Channel 1450. I covered Albert O when he was playing for Sacred Heart Griffin, a legendary high school program under legendary head coach Ken Leonard. And at that moment, he was a very raw player who we kind of called a baby gazelle because he was a late bloomer who was so long, athletic, fast, and physical, but still growing into his body. And then he goes to Mizzou and ends up being a stud in the SEC with Drew Lock throwing him the pill. Wasn't in Sean Payton's plans, so the Broncos wanted to move on. He's still only 25 years old, and I still think there's a solid player in there if he wants it. He's always been an athlete who has lacked some tenacity, but he's 6'5", 258 pounds, and the way that he moves, so graceful going down the seam and on the football field. But in his career so far in 4 seasons, he's only played 30 games. He's only reeled in 54 balls, 546 yards and 4 touchdowns. He did suffer a torn ACL early in his career, so that kind of curtailed things a little bit. But for Okwuegbunam, this is a tight end depth move for Howie Roseman and this front office. He can't really block it all, so he's strictly a pass-catching tight end. And another thought that I have, Kellen Moore with the Chargers, Kellen Moore with the Cowboys, longer sample size obviously with Dallas, did utilize pass-catching tight ends a lot. And I think that Philadelphia has to utilize Dallas Goedert a little bit more. And then you look at Jack Stoll, you look at Grant Calcaterra. They're different players than Albert O, who is kind of a glorified wide receiver. You line him up out of the slot because he can't block. You just use him as a pass-catching option. We'll see how he's in the plans for Philadelphia and Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni this upcoming season. As for Ty Davis-Price, in case you missed it, discussed the signing of him a little bit earlier this week. 2022 third-round pick by the Niners out of LSU. In his career in 2 seasons, only 40 carries, 120 yards. It's hard to get carries and tick when you're behind Christian McCaffrey, who this past year was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year, more than 2,000 all-purpose yards. TDP, as he's otherwise known, though, solid skill set. Good power, good balance, not a good pass blocker, but we've been waiting and wanting for the Eagles to pick up a physical short yardage back. Ty Davis-Price fits that mold and has a lot of potential. For him going back to LSU, it comes down to, does he want it? Only played in 7 games in 2 years since being a third-round selection, and went into LSU in his freshman year, and he was a pretty impact player for that national championship team in 2019, led by Joe Burrow. Undefeated season for the Tigers, or as Ed Orgeron would say, the Tigers. And that was one of the most loaded rosters in the history of college football. So TDP that year, 64 carries, 295 yards. Not like eye-popping numbers, but 6 touchdowns, pretty good. Misses some time in 2020, and then his draft stock really started to skyrocket because he is physical, and he is nimble. And in his junior season, 211 carries, more than 1,000 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Started that 2021 campaign really slow, finished it strong. Kyle Shanahan drafted running backs in the 3rd round consecutive years, both no longer with the team, and the Eagles took a chance on both. Trey Sermon, who's now with the Colts, and then TDP, we'll see what happens with him, with Boston Scott and DeAndre Swift set to be free agents. As for Darrian Kinnard, we know that Howie Roseman always likes to build his football teams along the trenches, and Kinnard has some pedigree. 2022 5th-round pick by the Chiefs out of Kentucky. Only played 6 special team snaps as a rookie. And then this year, as the Chiefs went back-to-back, winning another Super Bowl, I just hate that logo. I hate that football team. I hate Patrick Mahomes. And Andy Reid, I'll always have respect for him because growing up in Philly, he helped blossom my love for the game of football with all the success that the Eagles had in the early 2000s, there for 14 years, 5 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl appearance, some really good squads. But Kinnard in 2023 spent all year on the Chiefs practice squad. But 6'5", 322, like Albert O, still a young player, even though he's been in the league for a couple of years. 24 years old, 3-year starter at Kentucky under head coach Mark Stoops. Excelled in a zone run scheme, which Kellen Moore will run a little bit of that in the city of brotherly love. Agility, speed, power for his size. That's what Kinnard is going to bring to the table on the Eagles' 90-man roster, and he's going to try to compete for a spot on the Eagles' 53 this upcoming summer in training camp. What are you more excited for this offseason? Eagles have the 22nd overall pick. Once again, Howie Roseman has a treasure chest of assets in the NFL draft. So if you're excited for the draft more so than free agency, type D, but also you know that Howie Roseman's going to manipulate the cap. He's going to pull off the financial gymnastics, right? And the Eagles could be big-time spenders in free agency as well. I love both because this is my job, and I'm blessed to have this and be in this post. D or F, let me know what you're more excited for. Eagles finalizing their coaching staff. We'll get to that next. First, today's Eagles Now, sponsored by Game Time. This is the only ticketing app that I use. And if you're looking for last-minute tickets, this is the only app that you should have on your phone. Don't even worry about taking up all that space on your iPhone. Or if you're a cop, your Android, like Cowboys Report host Tom Downey. And with the Game Time app, don't worry about the other apps. This is the one that you should have because you're guaranteed to get in the door, get the best seats, lowest price guarantee. Prices drop as the event gets closer. And what I love about the Game Time app, too, you can see where you'll be sitting, getting the price point at your seats. And if you're a busy guy like me, covering the NFL, covering the NBA, college football, keeping tabs on Major League Baseball, running streak, closing in on 300 days, going to the NFL Combine. I was at the Natty in January, Super Bowl in Las Vegas. I don't have a lot of time. So sometimes I don't know what I'm going to be doing, right? That's why with the Game Time app, I can get tickets at the last possible moment, get in the door, lowest price guaranteed. You want to go to a Sixers game, Flyers game, Phillies games coming up as well, spring training or regular season at Citizens Bank Park, or you want to go to a concert, comedy show. Game Time has it all. Best part about it, $20 off when you use the code EaglesChat. Plug in that code so that you can save, but also so Game Time knows that Eagles now sent you. To the Eagles coaching staff now. Let's first run through the new faces on this Eagles coaching staff under Nick Sirianni. Vic Fangio, defensive coordinator. Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator. So 2 new play callers for Philadelphia at the coordinator spots, both very experienced. Christian Parker is going to be the defensive pass game coordinator and defensive backs coach. Philadelphia, for the 3rd consecutive year, will have a new DBs coach. They missed Denard Wilson. They missed out on not hiring him to be DC, in my opinion. Clint Hurt, he's swole, he's girthy. Pause. Senior defensive assistant and defensive line coach. Former Seahawks defensive coordinator coming to Philly to work under Vic Fangio. Roy Anderson going to coach the cornerbacks here. Joe Casper has been hired to be the safeties coach for the Birds. Bobby King going to coach the inside linebackers. Doug Nussmeier, we talked about that hiring a couple of weeks ago. He has a lot of Kellen Moore ties. He's going to be the quarterbacks coach, veteran with just decades of experience in coaching up quarterbacks. I think that's going to be good for the development of Jalen Hurts. And then Kyle Valero is going to be an offensive assistant. The key takeaway here with just the overall Eagles coaching staff, coming off a Super Bowl last year, I like the Brian Johnson promotion because of the familiarity with the organization. It made sense, had a relationship with Jalen Hurts, coveted coach. Eagles were a big fan of him. So were other teams across the NFL, and that's why other teams were submitting OC interviews for Brian Johnson. But him and Sean Desai were inexperienced coordinators. Brian Johnson had never called plays at the NFL level before, and Sean Desai only did it once in the final year under Matt Nagy in Chicago. So now you go from inexperienced coordinators to very experienced coordinators with a wealth of experience in actually calling plays. So that component changes drastically with Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore. There is one new position coach on offense. That's Nussmeier, who came as a package deal with Moore. And Nussmeier previously worked with Dak Prescott, developed him with the Dallas Cowboys, and then last year he followed Kellen Moore to the Chargers, and he coached Justin Herbert, whose season was cut short due to injury. The structure of the secondary, as far as the coaching staff, is going to be different for Philadelphia. The Eagles have a DBs coach and a defensive pass game coordinator in Parker, who worked under Vic Fangio while with the Denver Broncos. There are also 2 position coaches under Parker, which is a little bit different. Under Sean Desai, the Eagles had a nickels coach. Now they have a defensive backs coach and a cornerbacks coach. So that's a little bit different. Much of the offensive staff is staying intact. Brian Johnson, Marcus Brady, Roy Istvan, and Alex Tanney, they're all gone. And the offensive changes, though, a lot of people are going to make a big deal of this. Offense struggled last year. Didn't evolve under Nick Sirianni. No creative concepts, and he's keeping a lot of the same staff in-house. That's technically true when you look at the overall numbers of it. But what the Eagles are bringing on, a new system and a new play caller. And Jeremiah Washburn is the only major position coach who's pretty much kept on the defensive side of the ball. So that's also something big here. So I want you to grade the Eagles coaching staff here. A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know down in the chat. Do we have the returning coaches graphic as well? Because we can get to that as far as the familiarity on this coaching staff. Chip thought that he was going to slide that past me. I said, producer Chip, we got to get to that as well. So the Eagles returning coaches, this is some of the continuity that's on this staff, which I do think is somewhat important. Nick Sirianni, head coach. Michael Clay just got a contract extension over the next couple of years. Special teams coordinator Jamal Singleton, running backs coach and assistant head coach Kevin Patullo, pass game coordinator. Eagles are really high on him, and associate head coach Jeff Stoutland, run game coordinator, offensive line coach, best offensive line coach in the NFL, in my opinion. You have Jason Michael, who's going to be coaching the tight ends. Aaron Moorhead, I think he's done a good job in coaching up these wide receivers outside of Quez Watkins. Jeremiah Washburn, defensive ends coach and outside linebackers coach. Joe Panunzio, assistant special teams coordinator. Tyler Brown, special teams assistant. And then Eric Dickerson, not the legendary running back, offensive quality control coach. Those are the returning coaches for Philadelphia. We're going to be going live a little bit later on today on Philadelphia Eagles Now, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, 2:30 p.m. Pacific. For those of you hanging out on the West Coast, make sure you subscribe. Hit that bell icon. Therefore, when we do go live, you'll be notified.